Warning, this guide features early strats. In particular, this guide is going to closely follow the Shababin pastebin commonly used in NAPF. If you're rating an EU party finder, you might find that some of the spread positions are slightly different, so be mindful. Hi guys, and welcome to a Hector lecture guide to the fight Arcadion M4S. This is Wicked Thunder. For this fight, spread positions and pair positions are best to sort by mechanic. For Bewitching Flight, we'll use these positions here: tanks and range in the north, healers and melee in the south. This is to allow tanks and melee's uptime. For Witch Hunt, we're going to use clock spots. For this, we have the healers and melee swapped because it makes it a little bit easier to resolve the mechanic with uptime for melees. For Electrope Edge 1, we'll use these spread positions here, and these are boss relative. If you need to go into pairs, you just slide over towards your partner. For Electrope Edge 2, we'll be using these spread positions. If doing this on the other side, you can either do this true north, where group 1 are always north and group 2 are always south, or boss relative, it only affects the healers in range. Just make sure you've communicated with your party what you're doing. Pairs are fixed based on the number of stacks you get during the mechanic. Supports are always going to be directly in front of or behind the boss. DPS will either be underneath the boss or to the side of the boss. These are mirrored if you're on the other side. The fight begins with Wrath of Zeus, which is a hard-hitting raid-wide. Be sure to mitigate it or you'll die. The boss will transform into its bird form and jump towards the north. First up is Bewitching Flight. This has the laser beams from normal mode, as well as the electromines that you see on the west side that will always spawn on the west. These electromines will either cleave the bottom half of every tile or the front half of every tile. Here, every player needs to dodge to the front half of every tile. These will go off at the exact same time as the lasers from the boss, so make sure you're dodging both. We're going to get some floor patterns that we should recognize from normal mode that will go off either in first or out first. We get near to our spread positions as the boss will cast Electrifying Witch Hunt and spawn more Electromines. These will always spawn on the east, as well as one cheeky one in the north that always shoots directly through the middle. Some of the lines on the ground start to expand, forcing us to dodge towards the middle. We're also dodging to the front half of every tile to avoid the Electromines on the east side. As this attack goes off, either all supports or all DPS are going to get targeted with a jump. This will give them a physical vuln and a forked lightning debuff, preventing them from being able to take the next attack. Fortunately, the next attack is baitable. One of two symbols will appear on the boss. Either you get this pink symbol here, which will target the 4 nearest players for jumps, or this symbol, which will target the 4 furthest players for jumps. Because supports were jumped on first, DPS need to be, and we look at the boss, near. For this, we still dodge the ground AoEs, but here we're going to swap the range and the tanks so that DPS are the 4 nearest players and supports are the 4 furthest. This will ensure that every DPS gets 1 jump, and the tanks and healers don't take a second hit that would kill them. Afterwards, we're getting one of 2 casts. Widening Witch Hunt starts with an out and alternates in, out, in, or Narrowing Witch Hunt, which starts with an in and alternates out, in, out. This will come in combination with a set of near and far baits that target 2 players each. We get 4 symbols, one after another: far, near, near. These will always alternate, but which symbol appears first is random and is not connected to the widening or narrowing cast. We have supports take the first baits, DPS take the second baits, healers in range will always take the far baits, tanks and melees will always take the near baits. This works even if we have the other set of bait patterns that's possible. So let's look at how this works in reality. We're going to dodge this entirely at our clock spots. Remember that healers and melees are swapped for this mechanic to work more smoothly. Let me show first Widening Witch Hunt with far baits first. Every player is going to stay roughly near to their waymark, except for the players that are baiting who will go beyond their waymark. This is out, with the healers more out. This is followed with in, but the tanks will go more in. Out ranged more out. In melees more in. Here's another pattern that will work similarly. If you get narrowing and near, so you need to be both in and the first players need to be nearest, this will just be in tanks more in, out healers more out. In melees more in, out ranged more out. Where things can get a little bit tricky is when the cast and the first bait don't seem to match. So here we have Widening, which requires us to go out, but the first bait is near, meaning that the nearest players are going to be the ones targeted. For this kind of pattern, every player is going to go beyond the waymark except for the players that are baiting. So first we're going to do out, but tanks on waymark. In, healers on waymark. Out, melees on waymark. in, ranged on a waymark. If you get the combination of narrowing with farbaits first, this will work almost the same, just in the opposite order, so I won't show it. This is followed with a Wrath of Zeus raid wide, and then the first Electrope Edge. The first Electrope Edge is going to spawn Electro Mines in each corner of the arena, and now every player needs to be on a cardinal. The boss is going to cast Witch Gleam and send 2 line AoEs at a time towards each of the Electro Mines. You need to keep track of which corners are only hit once. So as the attacks go out, we count. You'll see that 2 corners are always hit twice, and 2 corners are always hit once. The corners that are hit once are only going to explode their own tile. The corners that were hit twice are instead going to have their AoE amplified to the point that it hits every adjacent tile, meaning we could only dodge to either the 2 or 4 corner in this pattern. The safe spots may be adjacent to each other. Before we commit to either, we wait for the boss to cast a Symphonie Fantastique, and then a sidewise spark. This is going to cleave half of the arena, meaning only one of our possible safe spots is now safe. We're all dodging to the 4 corner. At the same time, the boss will either have 8 orbs floating around them, which means we need to spread, or 4 larger orbs, meaning pairs. Here we go to our safe corner, and we spread as I showed earlier on in the guide. Here's the same mechanic again, but if we had had pairs and the other side being cleaved, this time we're dodging to the 2 corner, and we're getting into our partners. Remember, these are boss relative, with group 1 left and group 2 right facing the boss. Wicked Jolts is a tank buster next. This is going to target the top player in aggro with 2 hits. Each one gives a magic foam. You either have to do a double tank swap, or I recommend just have your first tank invuln this. There's only 2 of these in the entire fight, so each tank can invuln 1. The boss will cast Electrope Edge again, and for the second cast, we're going to go into our clock spots. These are standard clock spots. When the cast finishes, we get this grid, and every player gets a bunch of cubes around them, as well as a debuff. 4 players will have a short timer, 4 players will have a long timer. We are now going to be the people who are getting charged up, and our AoE size will depend on how many times we get hit. To make things a little bit simpler, all long debuff players are going to get charged up once, later on in the mechanic, but it's easiest to just, as soon as you see you're a long debuff, go ahead and add 1 to your total. From this point onwards, it's individual. You just need to count for yourself how many charges do you have. So I'll do this from main tank's perspective. The boss will cast Witch Gleam, and all the main tank is going to do is for themselves look, how many times do I get hit? Remember, they start at 1 because they're a long debuff. They go up to 2, and hit it again, so they go up to 3. If every player is doing this correctly, you should have 4 players that have 3 and 4 players that have 2, and these are neatly split between long and short debuffs and within the rolls. The boss will now cast Lightning Cage, and you'll see this exact pattern of AoEs appear. This pattern can be flipped to be facing towards any cardinal, but the pattern is identical always. For how we resolve this, we do it relative to where the pattern appears. All of the long debuff players are going to hide up in this safe spot at the top of the pattern. Everyone else is going to go to a spot based on how many times they got charged up and the roll, with tank healers going left relative to the top of the pattern and DPS going right. This works because the 2 stack people cannot clip the long debuff players, nor can the 3 stack players who can't clip anyone despite how massive their AoE gets. If everyone goes to their correct spot, the AoEs go off and you take heavy damage, but everyone survives. Immediately rush middle and face north, because the boss will always do a sideways spark and will always face true north for this. You need to dodge to the correct side and either spread or stack as the boss symbols show you to do. Here it's spread. Had we have instead had to do a pair dodge, note that these are not our usual partners. For this, we need to make sure that every long debuff player is paired with a short debuff player, because the players who still have the debuff are the targeted players for this. You should be able to see 1 player with cubes around them in every partner. We use fixed positions for this in the Shababin strats, in which you've got supports are always north and south, depending on how many stacks they have, and you have DPS are either under the boss or to the side of the boss, depending on how many stacks they have. Be mindful these are very tight positions if trying to keep uptime, so make sure you are at least max melee, if not dipping out slightly before the attack goes off. Afterwards, we get the same AoE pattern again. It might be rotated, and once again the safe spots are relative to the pattern, with short debuffs hiding in the tip of the pattern, and everybody else going relative. If If everyone goes to their final spot, damage, but you live. Head back towards the boss because we're going to get Wicked Bolt. This is a 5-hit shared stack damage. Stack everybody up, and you don't need to mitigate this too heavily, just make sure you top people up in between each hit so nobody dies. Afterwards, the boss will cast Ion Cluster. All players are going to get either a blue or yellow debuff, and these are split evenly between the rolls. The boss will jump north, transform into its gun mode, and now look very carefully at the boss. The boss is about to start shooting, cleaving one side of the arena, and you need to, as quickly as possible, dodge to the opposite side. Pay attention to the boss's hitbox. The boss will swerve slightly towards the direction they're going to cleave, so whichever hitbox arrow you see, that's the way to dodge. Here the boss swivels, and we see the right hitbox arrow, so we dodge over to the right. Taking 1 hit or 2 hits is usually fine, but 3 will kill any non-tanks, and even tanks need to dodge before the final hit, which will destroy the platform. The boss will jump to the middle of our new thin little column and start to cast Electron Stream, and you'll see that one side of the boss will glow blue and the other will glow yellow. This is your standard Final Fantasy XIV get hit by the opposite color mechanic, so if you have the blue debuff, go on the yellow side, yellow debuff, go on the blue side, and you need to make sure tanks are in the front on each side because it's a wild charge. The first player hit will take highest damage. As the hits go off, it cleanses 1 stack of your debuff, but also gives you another one. Before we get confused, let's break this down. This symbol here is a small point-blank AoE. This symbol here means that you're going to trigger a small donut. This symbol means you need to get hit by another player, one of these players with an arrow debuff. The blue one will target the nearest player, green one will target the furthest player. Getting hit once is fine, but twice will kill you. The simplest way by far to deal with this is the DN strat. In the DN strat, we're going to use these exact positions here, so the rivets on either side, as well as the perfectly middle of the tile. The support with the blue debuff, either the point-blank AoE or the donut, goes on the left rivet. DPS with that same type of debuff goes on the right divot. The purple debuff player goes in the perfectly middle of the tile, and the other player, regardless if they have green or blue arrow debuff, goes directly in front of them. If you position like this, it works perfectly. If all the players have point-blank AoEs, they miss everyone else. If they have donuts, they miss everyone else. If it's near baits, it only hits the purple player, and if it's far baits, it hits a purple player still, and while it goes through another player on the way, that will only do some light damage. If everyone positions correctly according to the strat, all of the debuffs go off, and you survive. The boss will cast another Electron Stream, and you need to make sure that you're on the correct side. This might require you to flip to the opposite side, so be aware, and remember to always have your tanks in front. After the hit goes off, you'll get the debuffs again, and we repeat this until we've done it 3 times in total. Every Electron Stream hits like a truck, so mitigate it heavily, and the debuffs also do damage as they cleanse, so be mindful. We get another Wicked Jolt Tank Buster. You want to make sure that your off-tank has aggro so they can invuln it. And then the boss will go middle and cast Electrope Transplant. We're going to be in our corners for this. However, we flip things 180 degrees because for the whole mechanic, the boss will naturally face south, and so we want our melees to not be unable to get their positionals for the next minute. When Electrope Transplants finish, we get these exact ground AoEs. Dodge slightly clockwise from your corner, and then dodge back to your corner. We have healers and ranged out while doing these dodges, because as the 5th AoE goes off, either all supports or all DPS are targeted with an AoE. Players hit need to be protected for the next attack. Because it was DPS hit, you need a support in front of you. So in this case, healers will dash in and get in front of their melees to protect them from the next attack, which is a line AoE targeting the player's hit originally. Don't forget to dodge one more time after this, and then the boss will repeat everything again. The second round will be exactly the same as the first time. After you've dealt with both rounds, stack up everybody south, heal and mitigate heavily as you're going to get a bunch of raid wides before the boss jumps up and sends you flying towards a brand new platform. After a short amount of time where the boss is untargetable, the boss will arrive and we'll start to cast Crosstail Switch. This is huge raid-wide damage split across 9 hits, so we're going to wait until the cast bar gets to just about the S in Switch, and then pop Tank Limit Break. The LB3 will help to protect you, but you're still going to need to heal and mitigate lightly throughout this. After all 8 hits go off, there's one final large hit, and you want to start to break Light Party 1 left, Light Party 2 right. That's because we get an exaflare pattern that looks a little bit like this on the ground. Have your light parties dodge into the small safe spots available between them, and now each light party is looking for a safe lane. The light party on the left, you're looking for a lane with 2 right arrows, in this case the second row. The light party on the right, you're looking for a lane with 2 left arrows, in this case the third row. At the same time as you're doing this, Wicked Blaze will target both healers for a shared stack. These are huge and don't hit very hard. As long as you're roughly split left and right, you're unlikely to miss anybody or die to this. Wait for the first exaflare attack to go off, and then immediately dodge into your safe lane while staying stacked with your group. Look at the boss. They're casting Wicked Special. If you see a flaming sword, get to the sides as the middle is unsafe. If instead you had seen Electric Claws, get to the middle because the sides are unsafe. Afterwards, position with your tank slightly in front of the rest of the group who should be stacked roughly middle. Mustard Bomb will target 2 players with tethers, and the tanks need to pick these up as they hit for huge damage and need to be soaked with very heavy mitigation by the tanks. After the tanks have their tethers, everyone will spread into these exact positions here. As Mustard Bomb goes off, 4 of the 6 non-tank players are targeted with attacks. Tanks need to pay attention to which 2 players were not hit. That's because the tanks are now targeted with another fire attack, and they cannot take it without dying because they have a fire vul. Each tank is going to move on to a non-tank player who was not hit to go spread this debuff onto them instead. Main tank takes the leftmost, off tank takes the rightmost. Just standing on them will spread the debuff across and prevent you from being able to take it again. Have the tanks go back, and the final 2 attacks will only target the players who just picked up the debuff. The boss will now cast Ethereal Conversion. You're going to see the tentacles on the boss glow one at a time, either left to right or right to left, and they'll either glow with red fire or blue water. Here we see fire left and fire right. This will get saved and stored and then used whenever the boss casts Tail Thrust. The fire attack is just a giant AoE to dodge, so since left was first, right is safe, and then immediately run across for left to be safe. It's possible for these tentacles to instead both be powered up with water. Here's right to left, but with water. The water is instead a knockback. These knockbacks are positioned on that red dot directly to the right of where all players are standing. When Tail Thrust goes off, you'll be knocked back, and then immediately positioned to get knocked by the second tentacle. This does some light damage during the attack as well, so be aware. Afterwards is Azure Thunder. This is a very heavy-hitting raid-wide. Mitigate this heavily. As Azure Thunder goes off, the stage is going to change, and we're now going to have only a circle in the middle that is safe. Walking into the outside will get you instantly killed. The boss is going to start prepping Twilight Sabbath, and we're going to make sure that all of our players are stacked nice and tightly middle. That's because Wicked Fire is going to bait puddles under every player. That's why we're stacked mid to bait them all together. The 4 rings are going to spawn clones 2 at a time, and these clones will always be doing a half arena cleave. Look at which clones spawned first, and dodge those clones and those clones only, but don't move until the puddles from Wicked Fire have appeared. The second 2 clones will now appear, and the boss will also cast a Wicked Special. Make sure that you dodge the clones while also dodging the Wicked Special at the exact same time. Here we don't actually have to move for the clones because they're cleaving the same side in this pattern, but we need to be in the middle so that we don't get hit by Wicked Special. Afterwards, make sure you top up everybody for Midnight Sabbath. For this, we're all going to go to our corners with tanks and melees in the north and healers and ranged in the south. Before I show this mechanic, just to break things down a little bit, for the next mechanic, if you see a bird clone, it's a donut AoE. If you see a gun clone, it's a line AoE. Dodge towards birds, dodge away from guns. Midnight Sabbath involves 8 rings that are going to all drop down at the same time, but 4 clones, either all cardinals or all intercardinals, are going to spawn slightly quicker. This will also come with a cast of either Scattered Burst, which is a spread then pairs, or Concentrated Burst, which is pairs then spread, which is why we're with partners. As the rings start to drop this time, we see cardinals spawn first, and it's birds, so we need to dodge towards them. Everybody rotates counterclockwise, and spreads in their spot because it's Scattered Burst. The second set drop down, and we see that they're guns. These don't have to be the opposite. You can get double bird or double gun, but in this case, we want to avoid the guns, so we stay right where we are, and since we spread first, now we do pairs. Immediately look at the boss afterwards for a Wicked Special. Dodge this just like you did before. In this case, it's to the sides. There's a Wicked Thunder raid wide afterwards, and this is a hard-hitting raid wide, so mitigate. The boss will now store an ethereal conversion, and this is going to be stored for quite a while, so you need to remember it for later. In this case, it was left safe. I like to type this in the chat so I can't forget. Immediately dodge to the sides with Light Party 1 left and Light Party 2 right, and get in the order tank, melee, healer, ranged. The boss will cast Flame Slash and destroy the middle of the arena. And then Raining Swords is going to give us 8 towers, and we soak them in the order I described previously. These will spawn swords that we're going to use for the next mechanic, Chain Lightning. The boss is going to tether 3 of the swords on one side, and to dodge at the end, this is just a personal memory mechanic now. You need to remember the order of what was the safe sword. In my mind, I number the swords from 1 to 4 from north to south, and you're just basically remembering a 4-digit code of what sword wasn't targeted. So we'll do this for the left side group. First is 3. The lightning bounces across, and when it comes back, next is 4. It bounces away, and when it comes back, 1. It bounces away, and finally, we already know the last one is 2, because it will always be 4 different safe spots. The other light party should have been doing the exact same thing, but their order will not necessarily be the same, so don't shout this out if you're doing voice callouts, because it will confuse the other group. Simply remember which order was safe for you, and dodge it near the giant gap in the middle of the arena, as the safe spot's larger there. So here we see Light Party 1 dodging the 3rd, and they slide down ready for 4. They pop sprint and get all the way up in line for 1. And then finally slide down ready for 2. At the very end, immediately you need to position ready for the tail thrust from the ethereal conversion saved earlier. We remembered it was left safe, so we dodge to the front left, and then across to the right. Afterwards, try as quickly as possible to get into mustard bomb positions to let the tanks cleanly pick up tethers, and then do mechanic exactly the same as you did before. Another ethereal conversion will be saved. Here it's going to be water right then left, so we remember knockback right. That won't be used for quite a while. The boss will cast Azure Thunder, mitigate heavily, and we get the stage transitioning again. The boss will cast Ion Cluster and give everyone 1 stack of the debuffs we saw earlier. Some will have a short timer, some will have a long timer. Pay attention to both to what debuff you got and what timer you have. We now get Sunrise Sabbath, and this is the final real wall of the fight. Sunrise Sabbath will always spawn 6 clones, you get guns on each corner, and you get 2 birds. The 2 birds will spawn in between the guns, and they're actually telling you where some towers are about to appear. How do we know where the towers are? The birds are looking at them. Currently, they're looking directly across, so the towers would appear east-west. If when the birds spawned in, you see them looking at an angle, the towers are instead going to spawn north-south. Our long debuff players are going to take the towers as they're the only ones that can, and it needs to be soaked by 2 players. To figure out which tower to take, we have our DPS look north and clockwise, supports look northwest and counterclockwise. All of the short debuff players need to deal with the guns. The guns will always charge up with a specific element, and you need to get hit by the opposite color. We're going to use the same priority to find a gun we can get hit on, and these guns can actually have their aim baited. So each player will follow the priority to find the correct gun, and they need to aim them away from the tower players, as if the tower players get hit, they will die. These baits are very precise. You need to be quite close to the gun that you're baiting, and as close to the wall as you possibly can to ensure that you don't clip anyone else. The towers will spawn, they'll get soaked, and the baits will go off shortly afterwards. We get the second set of birds, which are looking at the new towers, so we can already see their north-south. Look at the middle, there's a Wicked Special. Dodge this either in the middle or to the sides. And now we do the same thing again. The players that have already cleansed their debuff, they're going to go take the towers, and the players who had long timers are going to take the guns this time. Everyone else follows the priority to figure out which gun to bait, and they're going to bait these guns east-west this time. The towers and the guns go off, and you've survived the final real hurdle. Don't forget the final tail thrust. This is the ethereal conversion saved earlier, in this case, knockback right. Some people might want to adjust to the Uptime AutoCAD Sunrise strat. For this, you need to have waymarks on the second platform, which either requires you to get them from someone else or to have already beaten the fight. If the towers are east-west, the baiters are going to stand on the edge of the waymark, near to the east-west tower. This will bait the lasers like this, and it's actually a little bit less likely you clip anyone, while the tank and melee and south are still max melee. You can do the same thing if the towers are north-south. You stand on the edge of the waymark nearest to the tower, and it's going to bait these lasers in a way that will avoid killing anybody. Maybe worth giving it a try if you prefer it. The final mechanic is Sword Quiver, and this is essentially a soft enrage. You want to get into your partners, but stay roughly middle. These partners are tanks and melees north, healer range south. The boss is going to draw 4 lines on the ground, and each line hits for raid-wide damage. We need to dodge these lines while in our pairs, because as the sword comes down, partners are targeted with attacks. The boss will then repeat this, and you'll notice that 3 of the lines are always exactly the same, and it's only the final horizontal line that changes, meaning that your safe spots could look like this, this, or this. You'll get 3 total sword quivers to heal through, and finally the boss will cast a final Wicked Thunder. Kill the boss before this attack goes off, or it's game over. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed.